When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, and welcome back to the Grease Comedy YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be doing everything you need to know about House of the Dragon. So what do you guys need to know before you go into this show? What is the general premise of it? Who is going to be directing it? What is going to be going on with this show? And why you guys, I think, should be really excited for the show as a whole. But before we get into the video, if you guys like to subscribe, like, and comment, please do. It helps channel grow to feel that might like this content as well. And also, we're going to be doing House of the Dragon breakdowns right after the episodes come out. And then also, we'll probably be doing some preview videos before all of the episodes actually come out. Now, starting this, I want to talk about the direction and who is actually going to be in charge of House of the Dragon, the show. Now, the directors are going to be Ryan Condell, and then Miguel Sapochnik. I probably screwed up his last name, but he was one of the directors and or writers for Game of Thrones, especially in really renowned episodes like Hard Home. He was always very good in the episodes, I think, that he was given to just do it. And that, I think, is a good sign. Now, Ryan Condell, another thing I think is very interesting about him is that he is actually someone that is very much of a Song of Ice and Fire fan. And one of the biggest things here is if we look at the beginning of Game of Thrones was something where D&D went to George R. R. Martin and pitched why they should be the ones to be able to do it. This was the other way around. George R. R. Martin said he wanted to get Ryan Condell involved in this, and other things that we should be looking at and really why this show is going to be good is I think there's such a good relationship between George R. R. Martin and Ryan Condell, where we've gotten direct quotes from Ryan Condell saying, that he is, asking George R. R. Martin if he ever has any questions or approving things on whether they make sense. And he seems like someone that's very much trying to keep the story intact from the books and keep it very, in tune to the books, which is something I'm really happy about because it's something I was a little scared about going into House of the Dragon, but I think that he's going to do a very good job. So from the directing part of it, a lot of it is going to be the same. Now from the directing side of it, a lot of things are going to be different, but there's also going to be elements of the same. Now, getting into other things, the music is being done by the exact same person it was for Game of Thrones. That's a good sign because music was always something the show did very well. Costume and design should be the exact, same. Visually, Game of Thrones was never bad, even in the later seasons. They had some hiccups with things like the Starbucks Cup or whatever, but it's like, that wasn't really what made Game of Thrones worse in Season 8 and Season 7. It was the writing, and I think they've fixed that going into House of the Dragon. And if we even look at the importance of House of the Dragon to HBO, they do not want to screw this up because I think this is their last shot at getting the Game of Thrones fan base back. If this show flops, I am someone that is a Song of Ice and Fire fan, but I'm not even excited for the Jon Snow show. So looking at it from that side of the view and looking at other things outside of what the show is going to be about, I think that was all important to talk about and to understand as a viewer. Now, moving on to the actual narrative side of it. I did a video with House of the Stag talking about what reasons you guys would want to watch the show. And a lot of the things that I paralleled in that video was a Game of Thrones, at least the beginning of it, to House of the Dragon. The two are very similar. If we look at what the premise is going to be going into the show, it's going to be the idea of succession. Right? Who should succeed this old king? And this is going to be Viserys. He's not really old in terms of like how we perceive as being old, but he's middle-aged, and he at some point is going to die. And the whole idea is who can take the throne? Because in this world, as we know from a Game of Thrones, in A Song of Ice and Fire, the books as a whole, women usually get overlooked and they do not end up becoming in charge, right? So we see very short instances like Cersei taking over, Daenerys being kind of a queen figure, and Game of Thrones had a lot of those themes where women should be allowed to rule. And that's something that's going to be very difficult in this series because the very beginning, the first episode, is probably going to tackle how Viserys, the old king I was talking about, even becomes the king. And even in that, it's involved in a woman, Rhaenys, who is in the trailer. She is married to Corlys Velaryon. He is on the screen right now on the far left. And she gets passed over because she's a woman. And that's going to be something that's tackled in this show very heavily. And it's going to be all these different kind of claimants to the throne, and who are we going to pick, right? Because there's so many interesting characters. We have Viserys, the king's brother, being Daemon. He has a very good claim to the throne. We have other characters that eventually will kind of come into the fold, with Viserys only having one child with his wife. He has to kind of remarry, something that's, like, said in the trailers, that maybe he should remarry. So that leads to another thing where there's other kids now. There's a lot of things going on within House of the Dragon, and if you liked a lot of the political intrigue from the original Game of Thrones, especially the early seasons, you will love the way I think the show is going to be handled from that regard. Also, you have the similar beats of the old king dies, civil war happens because of it. That's going to be the main premise, and how we get there is going to be the interesting part, and how they decide to adapt Fire and Blood, because there's a lot of instances in Fire and Blood where they're unclear. We're kind of led to make our own decisions. There is a character, Kristen Cole, where him and Rhaenyra have some sort of interaction that you're kind of made to believe one side or the other, and depending on which route they go with it, it's going to either negatively impact Rhaenyra or Kristen Cole. So again, a lot of great characters and a lot of interesting things to see how Ryan Condell interprets these events, because again, it's not an exactly like factual story we're given from Fire and Blood. So I'm really excited to see how they go about those things, and what things that I personally think are actually did happen in Fire and Blood that maybe didn't happen in Ryan Condell's vision, or maybe they even did. And another thing I talked about in House of the Stags video that I was in is this show is going to have more of a dark tone. From what I can see and what the story actually is, there is a lot of horrific things that happen during the Dance with Dragons, and it is just not a very happy or pleasant time. It's going to be very much based in realism, where there's a lot of people having their own self-motivations. It's not like, oh, everybody's going for one candidate or this or that. People within each, party that's going to be going for this throne or whatever is going to have other players inside of each one. And something that I can maybe reference to is, if we look at Hitler's inner circle, something that's been, historically documented, is how all of those people in the inner circle were vying for more power and more attention with Hitler as a whole. That's something we will kind of see with certain characters, where they're trying to kind of gain power within each party. Kind of an extreme example, but that's kind of what I wanted to say on that idea. And I think the last thing that I want to kind of talk about, and everything you need to know about our House of the Dragon for the first episode, is that there really is no true telling of the story, right? Which is interesting, is the way that this show could kind of go on, that this is how some events were thought of, right? I don't know if they're going to go that route, but they could do it, because again, like I've talked about in this video, Fire and Blood is not a distinct story, right? So when you're adapting Fire and Blood, you have to take account of, there's multiple POVs that are saying different things happened, and their accounts pass through history, right? So we don't know exactly what happens, right? We know vaguely what happens, but there's minor details we're not sure of. So again, it's going to be interesting, because Ryan Condell kind of has his own creative use of how he saw the story play out, which I think is going to be really interesting. But let me know what you guys think about House of the Dragon. Where do you guys think is it going to be good? Do you guys think it's going to be bad? Do you guys want to be carefully cautious? I'm interested to see what you guys think, because I think this is really important to the Game of Thrones, like, MCU type thing, or even George R. R. Martin as a whole, engaging how much interest there really still is in A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones as a whole. So that is what I wanted to talk about in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys are excited for House of the Dragon. I am, and I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you guys all for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.